Hi, Sarah. How are you? Hey, welcome, friends. Good to have you here. One of the great advantages we have at Unity Village is that we're in this, or at Unity Temple, is that we're in the same area as Unity Village. And as a result, we get all the ministers that go out to the seminary out there to come here from time to time, work with us, teach classes. And Rich Carlini was one of them that worked with us for, I think, about a year or so before he went on to find his own church. But it's good to see you again. You haven't aged a bit. You look much lighter. Yeah, and all your crew, it's good to have you here. So how is your life? Great. Sometimes happy, sometimes sad, sometimes good, sometimes bad, sometimes worried, full of fear, sometimes easy, full of cheer, sometimes basking in the light, sometimes like a gloomy night. But don't fret or be a mess, because that's just the way that life is. Up and down. It's been that way since the very, very beginning. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Life is like an orchestra with a cacophony of emotional sounds and noises. And we're in the midst of it, experiencing it. But it's still your life. Just think about that for a minute. It's your life. And you, the personality that you are, the character that you are, you only have one in this incarnation. You only have one life. You come into this world, your life begins. Your life will conclude. You go out of this world. In between, you have time, and that is called your lifetime. It is all yours, nobody else's, and you can do whatever you want with it. Your lifetime. Now, life isn't meant to be difficult. It's not meant to be full of misery and suffering. What makes it so is the thoughts that we have in defining what's going on around us. And oftentimes, the thoughts that we have are self-defeating. We think that we can't do it. We think that we're not good enough. We think that somebody else has more talent to us. We compare ourselves to others. We feel bad. We compare ourselves to others, and we feel better. Any comparison, it should be null and void from your thinking. Life is a movement. It is a process. And the only thing that we suffer under is all these thoughts, feelings, attitudes, and perceptions that tell us there is something wrong, that tells us that we should be afraid, that tells us that we can't do it, that tells us that life's the enemy. And as I said before, many of those thoughts and feelings are about the self. It's the ego attacking the self. So that brings us to a very good question, and the question is, who are you? Well, you think you are, and that's who you are. You are who you think you are. And you are who you think you are because of the identity that you've established. And the identity that you've established has come forth from all of the impressions that were put on you growing up. And you established this identity. And as Richard Foster can tell you, with that identity, you've created a story. This is me. This is my life. This is how I react to it. This is how I relate to it. But the question is, what if you aren't this identity that's been created? Because it's been created by many, many different people around you that have said, this is who you are, or this is what you are, or this is what you should do. What if you're not that person at all? What if all that pain and that anguish and that suffering and that misery isn't necessary? What if you can just rise above that and step out of the story? And this brings us to the theory of the duck egg and the chicken house. Somehow, some way, nobody knows for sure, but a duck egg got into the hen house. And the mother hen sat on it, hatched it, and raised it as her own. She taught that little duck how to walk like a chicken, how to peck gravel like a chicken, how to cluck like a chicken, and how to do everything else that chickens do. Well, in the meantime, the duck thought that it was a chicken. Thought that it was a very unusual, uncoordinated, uncool chicken. And its life wasn't pleasant at all, because it was just so different from all the other chickens. Well, every day the chickens would go out for a walk, and on the walk they would pass by a lake. And whenever they passed by that lake, that duck would have this irresistible yearning within it. It didn't know what it was, but it just wanted to go towards the water. All the chickens said, no, you cannot do that. It'll take your life. Chickens don't go into water. You will drown. You need to stay here in the path. And so the duck did. But after a while, it got to the point where the duck's life was just so miserable. He came to the conclusion that if I can't go in the water, I don't want to live anymore. And the next day when they were on their walk, the duck went off the path. He started moving towards the water. All the chickens were clucking hysterically, saying, come back, come back, come back, you're going to die. The duck walked up to the water. The duck walked into the water. The duck swam across the water. And it discovered the life that it was meant to live. And it joined up with other ducks and lived happily ever after. Now, isn't that interesting? And just excuse me, I'm going to have to regress for one moment. That same duck walked into a drugstore and said, give me some chapstick. The pharmacist gave him chapstick, said that'll be 95 cents. The duck said, put it on my bill. I'm sorry, I had to do it. Oh my God, what a reaction. I'm surprised you're not throwing stones. Anyway, let's get back to being serious. Have you ever felt like there's something missing in your life, but you don't know what it is? You don't know how to find out? Or have you ever felt like you know what's missing in your life, but you just think that you can't find it or that you're not capable of getting it? Like the duck in the story, have you ever felt that you're just living a life that isn't completely satisfying, isn't completely fulfilling, that it is really yours to live, but somehow you're just stuck in it and you're going through the motions? Have you ever felt like there's something missing in your life? If you have, that's because there's something missing in your life. That is very, very simple. Now, I'm going to repeat something I said last week. For those of you who weren't here, I'm going to tell your story, you individually. This is personal to each and every one of you. I'm going to tell you your story. Even if I don't know you very well, even if I've never met you, I know your story. This is the truth. At some point in time, you were born into the world a bundle of joy. Am I right so far? Anybody here not born into the world? Okay, on a roll. When you were born into the world, you had a mind of a genius. Your capacity for learning was greater than any machine, than any computer, than any person over the age of 10. You were this literal little genius that started to grow and began to perceive the world around you. In about 6 months to a year, something miraculous happened. You woke up one day and you had a sense of self. You realized that little foot that you had been chewing on for 6 months was actually part of you. And you began to establish your identity. Now, there wasn't much you could base upon it inside you, so you had to turn outside of yourself to find out more and more about who you were. So you began to observe everything that took place around you. Everything that was said to you, you listened to and you recorded. Every action that was taken towards you, you recorded it. Every emotion that was expressed towards you, you recorded it. Every little activity that you engaged in and the reaction of people around you when you did, you recorded it. And this went on, and it went on, and it went on for about 6 or 7 years until you had an identity called the ego. And at that point in time, the ego more or less closed the shop. It said, we don't need any more information. I know exactly who I am, and I can take it from here. So the ego began to live out this identity that had been established. Once again, remember, an identity established on concepts from people around you. And the identity, or the ego, began to go through life in this framework. The ego is our concept of who we are. It tells us how we relate to things, how we relate to people, how we react to different situations and circumstances. It is a little general inside us that wants to know everything, that is very, very fearful of being proven wrong, that is very, very fearful of not knowing, and so it sticks to the story that was written. This is the story of your life. It says, this is the character you are. You play it out exactly as it is written. And we do that. We're inside this story. I'm inside the Duke story. I think I know who I am based on the identity that was established when I was 7 or 8. That's how I live my life. Now, the problem is that many of the situations and circumstances we engage in, we are fearful of because somewhere along the way we think that it's important what other people think of us, or it's important that we succeed at everything, or that if we can't do something that we back out of it. And so life becomes kind of a fearful experience. It's like we're walking through life this way, but our head is turned back to the past to find out, what do I do now? Who am I? How do I react to this? Everything comes from the past. The past is basically dictating the present. Now, in the book of Genesis, there's a story of Lot. And Lot was a good man, a good man. He was a hardworking man. He was an honest person. And because of that, he became a very prosperous person. But he lived in a town that was very corrupt. And God became angry at the town, and he decided to destroy it. But since Lot was a good man, God sent angels to Lot and said, get your family and get out. And never, ever look back. So Lot gathered up his sons and his daughters and his wife. They took what little possessions they could take, and they left the city. As they got to the city gates, just outside of it, Lot's wife looked back with mournful eyes at the house she was leaving, at the friends she was leaving, at the possessions she was leaving. And it says right then she turned into a block of salt, immobilized, stuck in the past. Now the story, of course, is a myth, but it is there to teach us the dangers and the pitfalls of getting stuck in the past. It is there to teach us that we need to move forward. And I've talked about the ego in ways where it doesn't sound like it's real flattering for us to have one, but it's not the ego's fault. The ego is just like a little computer that was programmed by the world around it. And if it was programmed with abusive language, it was programmed with great anger or great humiliation or great criticism, then that's just the way it became. But we have to remember that the ego basically shut down and stopped maturing at the age of 7 or 8. Now, we've learned a lot more about everything in the world since then, but we haven't learned a lot more about ourselves unless we've intentionally decided to step out and test the ego.